Let's be honest, immigration is a complicated issue. It can leave us wondering how to respond faithfully to those who enter into and seek to be a part of our communities. Maybe the simplest response is one that we're all equipped to do: offer hospitality. When I think about hospitality, the first story that comes to mind is Abraham and Sarah's encounter with three traveling strangers in Genesis 18. We pick up in Genesis at the dwelling place of Abraham and Sarah. It's the heat of a day and they're resting in their tents. Abraham looks up and suddenly notices three travelers, strangers making their way towards him. Instead of staying in place and letting them pass by, he runs from his tent to meet them and welcomes them with open arms. He extends a verbal greeting of honor and even bows to them in his own home to let them know that they're welcomed and safe. But Abraham isn't content to only extend kind words and greetings. He moves into action and invites them to stay for a while and receive his family's hospitality. He fetches water for the strangers so they can wash up and then rest under the shade of a tree, likely the best seat available during the day's scorching heat. Abraham then decides to offer a little bread and runs to Sarah and asks her to begin preparing the food. But not just any bread will do. Instead, Abraham asks Sarah to use the finest flour, the best that they have. It's like the steak that you would save in the back of the refrigerator for an anniversary dinner coming up. And the amount of fine flour mentioned, 3 seahs, could have prepared up to 60 pounds of bread. The hosts are giving their best. If that wasn't enough, Abraham also readies a tender calf and brings with it curds and milk, standing by to serve if the travelers need anything else. Abraham and Sarah have gone above and beyond to offer life-changing hospitality to traveling strangers they know nothing about. They are a model for us today as we encounter strangers, travelers, and immigrants. But before we talk about any action in response to immigrants, let's look at the story from the traveler's perspective. Readers know on the outside these men are divine, but that's not immediately apparent to Abraham and Sarah. We can imagine these strangers are passing through a land foreign to them and look different than local residents. They are likely hungry, thirsty, in need of conversation, and tired from traveling in the heat. These strangers are at the mercy of locals to provide their most basic needs and could be asking themselves, will anyone help someone like us? Is this a place welcoming to strangers, travelers in need of assistance? The hospitality the strangers need may not be available in this new place, so approaching Abraham's tent is a risk that they'll have to take. The travelers are vulnerable with immediate needs, and their position in the story is similar to immigrants today seeking safety and basic provisions. So what does the example of Abraham and Sarah in Genesis 18 show us about extending hospitality to immigrants? First, we can look to meet the most basic and immediate needs like food, safety, conversation, and a willingness to be generous with what we have. Notice that Abraham and Sarah didn't debate the politics of sharing food or whether or not it was right to make another human being feel safe. Instead, they responded to the strangers with generous hospitality. We know that immigrants are often forced to leave their home country for social, economic, or political reasons, and frequently arrive poor and needy. Knowing this can motivate us to offer basic resources that directly help an immigrant. If there is not an immigrant community near you, consider partnering with an agency who helps to meet basic needs. There are creative ways and places to extend help. Second, good hospitality ensures protection while under our care. Unfortunately, some citizens can feel threatened by immigrants, fearing the loss of identity and resources. This is apparent in political discourses today when politicians and fringe groups generalize and dehumanize other cultures out of fear. But such responses deny basic protections to vulnerable immigrants. Immigrants are easily victims of racism and exploitation and need more than charity, though an important piece of the puzzle. What's needed is protection while they work to transition into a new place of life. Outside of offering up our own homes and churches, citizens can advocate for fair and just laws that ensure protection while immigrants are under the care of the government. Consider writing local representatives or getting involved with groups that advocate for immigrant protection and fair treatment. Protection is essential for good hospitality. Lastly, we can respond by transforming strangers into guests. Abraham and Sarah's guests were not expected. They were not invited for a planned visit, but unknown travelers who showed up unannounced. But instead of going inside and closing their home to visitors, they welcomed them as a member of the family and transformed these strangers into guests through hospitality. There are some today who might view an immigrant's arrival as hostile, unwelcomed, or potentially a threat. But those who extend hospitality, like Abraham and Sarah, seek to make outsiders friends and allies. Such a transformation affirms the human dignity in each person, regardless of race, ethnicity, language, customs, or citizenship status. Culture can sometimes dehumanize immigrants who are not like us, but hospitality breaks down those walls when strangers become guests. How do we respond to immigrants? We first try to understand the vulnerability of the travelers and then act like Abraham and Sarah with generous hospitality.